I spent my whole life giving love, time, money, myself, until one night, over a table filled with food I bought, I heard something that shattered me forever. This isn't just a story of humiliation. It's a story of awakening. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, this story is for you. Make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know your story too. I still remember the clink of crystal glasses, the low hum of jazz music floating through the house I paid for, the smell of the roast chicken I had seasoned that morning, slow cooking while I ran errands for a dinner I wasn't even supposed to be part of. But I was there, because Olivia had forgotten to tell me her parents were coming over. Again. And the house needed to look perfect. Again. I should have known better than to stay. I should have known what was coming the moment her mother looked at me with those half-curious, half-condescending eyes and asked, "And you are?" Olivia didn't miss a beat. "Oh," she said, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. "That's Margaret, our unofficial maid. Keeps the house running." Everyone laughed. Even Ethan, my son. I just stood there, holding the empty wine bottle I had brought up from the basement. I smiled, politely, as if I didn't feel the floor disappear beneath my feet, as if my heart wasn't crumbling piece by piece. I excused myself, set the bottle on the counter, and walked slowly to my bedroom. They kept laughing behind me. Not one of them, not my own son, bothered to correct her, to say that's my mother, to say anything. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the door I'd painted myself years ago when we first moved in. I remembered the day I signed those mortgage papers. My name, my credit, my down payment. Ethan had just graduated college. Olivia wasn't even in the picture yet. They had nothing. I gave them everything. And now I was the maid. The next morning I made coffee like I always did. I fed the cat Olivia pretended to like. And when she came downstairs in her yoga outfit, too busy on her phone to even say good morning, I stood there and waited. She looked up eventually. I handed her the keys. All of them. The front door, the back, the garage, the mailbox. "What's this?" she asked, her manicured brow furrowed. I smiled. "Good luck paying the mortgage now." She blinked. "What?" I walked past her, down the hall, past the photos I had framed, the furniture I had chosen, the walls I had painted. I didn't take anything. Just my purse and the coat I'd worn when I brought Ethan home from the hospital. I didn't even say goodbye. I heard Ethan calling my name as I opened the door. I didn't stop. He ran after me barefoot in the driveway, but I kept walking. I didn't slam the door of the car. I closed it gently, calmly, because something inside me had snapped, but not in the way you think. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was clarity. And that was the most terrifying thing of all, because clarity is quiet. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It just knows, and I knew for the first time in my life that I was done. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew where I wasn't staying. The last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was Ethan standing in the driveway, stunned. He had no idea how much he'd just lost, and neither did I, yet. They say you don't realize you were drowning until you finally breathe. That first night in the small apartment left to me by my great-aunt Ruth, it wasn't freedom. Not yet. It was silence, thick, echoing silence that settled over everything like dust. The apartment smelled like time, old floorboards, yellowed wallpaper, a heater that groaned like it had seen better decades. I dropped my bag on the kitchen table and stood there, unsure if I was supposed to cry or laugh. I did neither. I just stood, staring at the chipped tiles, remembering the home I had just walked away from. But it wasn't a home anymore. Not for me. Over the next few days, I moved like a ghost. I slept on the couch because the bed frame in the bedroom was broken. I ate peanut butter sandwiches and microwaved soup. I didn't call anyone. Not because I had no one, but because no one had called me. Ethan didn't text, didn't email, not a single word. I suppose Olivia had told him not to. Or maybe worse, maybe he just didn't care. I kept thinking about that dinner, about the way they laughed, about the way he laughed. I raised that boy, alone, after my ex-husband left. I gave up my career, my plans, myself. I cleaned motel rooms at night and stocked groceries at dawn just to keep a roof over our heads. And when my parents passed and left me that insurance money, I used it all to buy a house, a home. I never asked for rent, never made him pay a dime. And somehow, in Olivia's version of the world, I had become the help. I started writing at night, old spiral notebooks, the kind I used to buy for Ethan in middle school. I filled page after page, not for anyone to read, just for me. I wrote things I had never said out loud, about how I used to stand in the kitchen and wait for him to say thank you, about how I'd cry in the garage when they'd go out to dinner and not invite me, about how I pretended to be asleep so I wouldn't hear them mocking my TV shows in the living room I paid for. And then one day, while looking for a light bulb in the upstairs storage closet, I found the old metal trunk Ruth used to keep under her sewing machine. Heavy, rusted. I pried it open, expecting thread and buttons. Instead, I found envelopes, dozens of them, and one in particular that changed everything. It was addressed to me, in Ruth's familiar handwriting, dated nearly 3 decades ago. If you're reading this, it means you've come back, and I'm sorry you had to. My heart pounded as I unfolded the pages. They were yellowed, fragile. Inside were copies of hospital forms, notes, and a single photograph of a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket. Not Ethan. There was a name, Michael Jameson. I read the letter 3 times before it made any sense. Ruth had been a nurse at the hospital where Ethan was born. She said she always had doubts. She'd seen something odd in the nursery the night I gave birth. A last-minute room switch, a confusion with the tags. But by the time she raised the issue, it was too late. The babies had already gone home. She never told me, said she was afraid, said she hoped she was wrong. But then, years later, she found a document buried in her files, a quiet settlement from the hospital to another family. And that's when she knew. Ethan wasn't my son. My hands trembled. I thought I might pass out. I stared at the photo, at the name, Michael Jameson. My mind refused to process it. Because if this was true, who was Ethan? Who was I to him? And then something strange happened. I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel rage. I felt free. Not because I didn't love Ethan, but because suddenly, all those years of pain, of feeling like a stranger in my own life, made sense. Maybe that coldness I always felt from him. Maybe it wasn't imagined. Maybe he always felt like a stranger. And maybe I wasn't crazy after all. I spent the rest of the night reading every paper in that trunk. Ruth had kept it all. DNA reports, affidavits, a small article about the Jameson family, successful, educated, local, and still living in the same town. My real son had been here all along, growing up just a few miles away. I folded the letters back carefully, placed them in a new envelope, and put them in my nightstand drawer. Then I looked at myself in the mirror for a long, long time. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't ashamed of her. She was broken, yes, but she was waking up, and the world had no idea what that meant yet. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels punishing. That was the kind of silence I lived in for weeks after reading Aunt Ruth's letter. I didn't know what to do with the information. I carried it inside me like a live wire, dangerous to touch, impossible to ignore. I didn't reach out to Ethan. I didn't go looking for Michael. I just existed. Each day, I woke up, made a single cup of coffee, stared out the dusty kitchen window, and tried to understand who I was now. The Margaret who raised Ethan wasn't the same woman who read those letters. That Margaret was a mother, a wife once, a caregiver, a giver of everything. But who was I without that identity? One evening, the heater went out in the apartment. I lit a candle and bundled myself in blankets, curling up on the couch with the hospital files in my lap. I must have read them 100 times, every line, every signature, every timestamp. It all checked out. It was real. My real son, Michael Jameson, was born on the same night as Ethan, in the same wing, in a hospital that would later settle quietly with another family, hoping the truth would never surface. Ruth had made copies of everything before she passed. She left me the pieces of a truth that had been stolen from me. I felt grief, but not for Ethan. I grieved the time, the moments I could have had with Michael, the birthday parties, the first days of school, the scraped knees and science projects, all those things I thought I was doing for my child. They were meant for someone else. And yet, somehow I didn't feel hatred toward Ethan. My love for him hadn't been biological. It had been unconditional, or so I thought. But when someone you raise doesn't defend you, doesn't even see you, it forces you to reevaluate everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally pulled myself together. I had been hiding too long. I wasn't ready to confront Ethan. Not yet. But I could start somewhere quiet. I walked into town and stood across the street from the little bookstore near Main and Elm. Jameson's Books. It was painted in deep green with hand-lettered signs on the windows. I'd passed it dozens of times before and never noticed it. He was there. Michael. I didn't need to ask. He looked about 30, maybe a little older, clean-cut, reading glasses. He was helping a young woman find a poetry book. His voice was soft, patient. His posture was gentle but sure of itself. I stood across the street, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the son I never knew I had, and I cried. Right there on the sidewalk, not sobbing, not loudly, just quiet, unstoppable tears that rolled down my cheeks and into the collar of my coat. I didn't go in, not that day. I just watched. And then I did it again the next day, and the next. It became a ritual. I'd walk the block, sit on the bench near the corner, pretend to check my phone or drink coffee from a paper cup, and I'd watch Michael living the life I was never part of. It wasn't stalking. It was mourning, but also preparation. Because slowly, I was starting to put the pieces together. While I sat outside that bookstore, I started noticing things. The schedule of deliveries, the names of customers, the rhythm of the store. I was observing, yes, but not just him. Them, Ethan and Olivia. I started tracking them too, subtly. I knew their patterns from memory. Olivia always posted on social media, tagging her favorite brunch spots, yoga studios, and wine tastings. It wasn't hard to follow the trail, and what I saw made me nauseous. They weren't struggling. They were pretending. Olivia's business, some lifestyle coaching brand, was mostly smoke and mirrors, rented office space, paid followers, credit cards maxed out to maintain appearances. And Ethan? He had quit his job 6 months ago. Olivia called it manifesting a new chapter. I called it delusion. They were building a house of cards, and they had no idea the wind was coming. I didn't tell anyone what I had discovered. Not yet. Instead, I started keeping a second journal. Not like the first, filled with emotions and heartbreak. This one was strategic. Dates, names, business filings, public records. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was planning. They thought I was gone, invisible, irrelevant, but I was more present than I had ever been. And I was about to remind them exactly who I was. The first time I saw Michael up close, I couldn't speak. It was a rainy Thursday. The bookstore was nearly empty, and he was restocking the biography section, humming under his breath. I had lingered outside too long, and when he turned and looked through the front window, our eyes met. He gave a polite, welcoming smile, nothing more. Just the kind of kindness you offer a stranger. And that's what I was to him, a stranger. My heart clenched. I turned away quickly, pretending to check my phone, but my hands were shaking too hard to fake it convincingly. I walked fast, ducking around the corner, barely making it to the car before the tears came. How do you tell someone that their entire life started with a mistake? How do you look a grown man in the eye and say, "You're not who you think you are, and neither am I"? I went home and pulled out Ruth's letter again, read it 3 more times. She hadn't just discovered the truth. She had investigated it. The name Michael Jameson wasn't a guess. It was confirmed. She had found the settlement papers. The hospital never told me, because I was never meant to know. And the Jamesons? They must have known something. Maybe not the full truth, but enough to accept a quiet payout. But I wasn't here for revenge against them. I wasn't even sure what I was here for. I just wanted to know him, to see if the ache in my chest could be filled by the reality of who he was. So I went back. I started small. I bought a book. Michael rang it up himself. "Good choice," he said with a smile. Hard to find these days. His voice was warm, familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. He handed me the bag, his fingers brushing mine for a second. I nodded. "You own this place?" "Sort of," he said. "My parents helped me get started. They're retired now, so I keep busy here." Of course they helped. Of course he had support. Not like Ethan, who'd had nothing but my blood, sweat, and sacrifice, and who had turned around and offered me up as a joke. Michael had parents, but not me. And Ethan had me, but never wanted what I gave. The universe had scrambled the puzzle and left us all bleeding over the wrong pieces. I started visiting the bookstore every few days, casual. Sometimes I bought a novel, sometimes just browsed. Michael began to recognize me. He'd say, "Back again?" with that easy smile. We made small talk, weather, books, local events. I never told him my name. Not yet. It wasn't time. Meanwhile, back in the shadows of my old life, things were shifting. Ethan sent me one message, a text that said, "Mom, are you okay?" Nothing more. After 3 weeks of silence, that's what I got. I didn't reply. I had nothing left to say. But I started looking deeper into their world. I pulled up the deed to the house. It was still in my name. Olivia had tried to refinance without my permission. Denied. She couldn't afford the mortgage. Ethan had no income. I could have evicted them on the spot, but that would have been too easy. No, I needed them to feel the slow unraveling, the fear, the realization that the foundation they stood on wasn't just fragile. It belonged to someone else entirely. Me. Every night, I wrote. My new journal was meticulous. Every receipt, every conversation, every time Michael mentioned a hobby, a favorite author, a childhood memory, I wrote it down, not to use against him, but to understand the son I never got to raise. And in between the lines, I began to see the truth more clearly than I ever had before. Ethan didn't treat me poorly because he was switched at birth. He treated me poorly because he chose to, because Olivia gave him permission to, because somewhere along the line, he stopped seeing me as someone to respect and started seeing me as someone to dismiss. But Michael, he didn't know me at all, and yet he treated me with more kindness in 5 minutes than Ethan had in 5 years. I wasn't ready to tell him. Not yet, but I was close. And when the time came, I wouldn't just tell him who I was. I would tell him everything, about the hospital, about the switch, about the life that was stolen from us both. But first, I had to finish watching the collapse of the life I had already left behind. Because once the final piece fell, I wouldn't be looking back. I never planned to become a shadow in my own story. But sometimes the only way to see people clearly is to step out of the light. After that day in the bookstore, things shifted inside me. Not suddenly, but like a slow sunrise creeping across a frozen field. Quiet. Inescapable. I didn't rush anything. I wasn't just trying to reconnect with a son I never knew. I was trying to reclaim myself. I began walking a little taller, speaking a little stronger. I bought a second-hand laptop and began typing my notes into files. Evidence, timelines, names. This wasn't a diary anymore. It was strategy, survival. And one thing became crystal clear. Ethan and Olivia's world was held together by duct tape and lies. The house they lived in, my house, was still under my name. Olivia's lifestyle business, Olivia Ascends, was a fabricated empire. Fake clients, fake testimonials. She'd built a brand on buzzwords and filters, selling personal growth advice while driving a leased luxury car she couldn't afford. I found the LLC paperwork online. I checked tax records. I looked up business reviews. Every post she made was curated. Every event they attended was a photo op. And behind it all was debt. So much debt. Maxed out cards. A defaulted private loan. Ethan's student debt, still unpaid. They were suffocating under a mountain of bills, but too proud to say a word. Or maybe too arrogant. That's when I knew. If I pulled just one string, everything would fall. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I had one more step to take first. Michael. I still visited the bookstore and he still didn't know who I was. But each interaction chipped away at the fear. We talked about books, about life, about small things, TV shows, good coffee, city noise. Once we sat at the tiny cafe next door and he told me about how he almost became a teacher. But his love for books pulled him into business. You remind me of someone, he said once, sipping his tea. Someone I can't place. I smiled. Maybe a librarian? He laughed. Maybe. That moment stayed with me for days. I didn't just like him. I recognized him, not just by the file I had read or the photo Ruth left me, but in the way he treated people, in the way he listened, the quiet strength in him. It felt like mine. It was in his posture, his calm, his presence. I started dreaming about a different life, one where I'd raised him, one where we baked cookies in the kitchen, where I took him to soccer games and cheered from the sidelines. I could picture it so vividly it made my chest ache, but I couldn't go back, so I planned for what was next. The first thing I did was call a lawyer, not for revenge, for justice. I wanted the house sold. I had every legal right to it. I made the down payment, paid every bill, and never signed it over. Ethan had always said, "We'll put it in your name later. No rush." Of course, there was no rush. For him, I was paying everything. Now I wanted my name back, my rights, my home, if not physically, then legally. I met with an attorney downtown, a woman about my age, sharp and direct. She listened without judgment. When I told her what happened, she nodded slowly and said, "We'll file the motion this week." I signed the papers with a steady hand. That evening, I walked past the house. The porch light was on. Olivia was sitting on the swing, scrolling on her phone, glass of wine in hand. Inside, Ethan was on the couch, playing video games. Their lives were running on autopilot. No idea that the ground beneath them was already shifting. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about restoring balance. And when the house sold, they would feel what I had felt for years, powerless. And maybe, just maybe, they'd understand what it meant to be discarded. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream. I just watched, waited, and walked away. The first domino had fallen, and none of them even knew it yet. I've always believed that silence is stronger than noise, that true strength isn't in how loud you fight, but in how deeply you know you're right. The day the official notice went out to Ethan and Olivia, I was sitting at a cafe near the courthouse, stirring honey into my tea with a calm I hadn't felt in years. My lawyer said they'd receive it by AM sharp. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then I turned it over and let the silence speak for me. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear his voice. I just wasn't ready to hear him lie. Later that afternoon, I checked my email and saw his message. It wasn't long. Just, "Mom, what are you doing? Please call me. Olivia is freaking out." Of course she was. The mortgage was due, and now they couldn't refinance, because the person they thought was too weak to matter was the one holding the deed, and they never saw it coming. A week later, I got another call. Olivia this time. I didn't answer her either. She left a voicemail, her tone tight, barely controlled. "Margaret, we really need to talk. This is all just, it's a misunderstanding." Ethan says you're going through something, and we're here to support you. But you're putting our lives at risk, and that's not fair. I listened twice. She called the house hers, and my silence? It became sharper, more deliberate. They didn't understand yet, but they would. 2 days later, Ethan showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole before he even knocked. Hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes, a man unraveling. I didn't open the door. He stood there for a long time, knocked once, then again, then said, "Mom, please, don't do this." I stood on the other side, my hand on the knob, but I didn't turn it. I let him sit in the discomfort of being unheard, just like I had, for years. The following week, my lawyer finalized the paperwork to list the house. I would get the full profit, every cent, legally, ethically, emotionally. All of it was mine. Olivia tried to fight it. She claimed contribution of value. My lawyer smiled and said, "Let's see her prove it in court." She couldn't, because she never invested in anything but appearances. And now, those were crumbling, one filter at a time. Word got out. Olivia's parents stopped commenting on her social media posts. Clients began backing out. She made a video trying to explain the unfairness of generational property law. People saw through it. And I didn't post a thing. I just kept showing up at Michael's bookstore. We had coffee again, talked about an old novel we both loved. He recommended a memoir to me. "It's about grief," he said, "but also forgiveness." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I think you'd like it," he added. Maybe I would, but not yet. I wasn't done grieving or forgiving. At home, I began boxing up old photos, pictures of Ethan as a baby, school portraits, birthday parties where I did all the work and none of the credit. I didn't throw them out, but I put them away, because the woman who had spent her life giving everything was gone. And the woman who took her place, she wasn't angry. She was awake. The papers were signed. The house was going on the market. And somewhere inside that green bookstore across town, my real son laughed at something a customer said, completely unaware that his life was about to change too, but in the best way. Because not all losses are tragedies. Some of them are beginnings in disguise. I always thought masks were something people wore at costume parties, but Olivia wore hers like a second skin, flawless, smiling, unshakable. The kind of woman who always knew how to pose for a photo, how to angle her voice just right in public. But the thing about masks, eventually, they crack, and I was about to shatter hers completely. The idea came to me one morning while browsing the local business directory. I had already gathered enough personal dirt, credit problems, fraudulent Instagram partnerships, late mortgage payments. But I wanted more than rumors. I wanted facts. Something concrete, something they couldn't spin. So I hired a local business consultant, a man named Darren, quiet, professional, discreet. I told him I needed a full audit of a business, nothing illegal, just a private deep dive into its structure. I gave him Olivia's company name, Olivia Ascends LLC. He got to work. A week later, he delivered everything in a neat folder. And what he found, even I wasn't prepared for. Olivia's entire business model was a lie. No tax filings for the last 2 quarters. Several invoices forged to look like they came from real clients, but the clients didn't exist. Photo shoots staged at rented properties she claimed were home makeovers. Her so-called partnerships were just affiliate links with inflated metrics. She wasn't just pretending to be successful. She was deceiving everyone. I asked Darren, "Would this hold up under scrutiny?" He looked at me and said, "If this goes public, she's finished. Financially, professionally." And that's when I made a decision. I printed everything. Then I found the address of Olivia's parents, the same people who once laughed in my home, clinking wine glasses while their daughter humiliated me in my own kitchen. I mailed them the file, anonymously. No letter, no signature. Just a simple note on top that read, "Everything you think you know is a performance." 2 days later, the first cracks appeared. Olivia's Instagram went quiet. No stories, no curated morning routines. Her newest post, an inspirational quote about being misunderstood, was flooded with strange comments. Then, like dominoes, her world began to collapse. Her website went offline for maintenance. Her last planned workshop was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. And then, I heard the cherry on top from an old neighbor who still followed her. Olivia's mother was seen leaving her house in a rage, shouting on the phone, face red, purse swinging wildly. Whatever happened behind those closed doors, it wasn't filtered, and it wasn't pretty. Ethan called me again that night. I didn't answer. He left another voicemail. "Mom, I don't know what's happening. Olivia's parents aren't speaking to us. Someone sent them stuff, documents. They think we forged them. Did you do this?" I didn't reply. He was finally seeing her for who she really was, and himself too. He had spent years defending a woman who destroyed everything in her path, starting with me. Let him feel it. Let him sit in it. That night, I walked to the bookstore again. Michael was closing up. He waved when he saw me. Back again? He said, unlocking the door to let me in. You should just work here at this point. I smiled. Maybe I should. We sat on the floor, surrounded by stacked paperbacks. He was cataloging a new shipment. I helped without being asked. Why do you come here? He asked, not unkindly. The question caught me off guard. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He had my eyes. I hadn't noticed before. I like the way it feels in here, I said. Like, nothing's pretending to be something it's not. He tilted his head, considering me. Me too. We worked in silence after that. No small talk, no more questions. But in that quiet, something settled between us. Not truth, not yet, but something close. A thread connecting us. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's life. I felt seen. And the woman who once stood invisible in her own kitchen? She was gone. In her place stood someone they never expected. Someone they never should have underestimated. I used to think heartbreak came in one big blow, like a car crash or a door slamming shut. But it's not like that. Not always. Sometimes it comes slowly, like water leaking through a roof, drip by drip, until one day the whole ceiling collapses. And Ethan? He was finally standing under the flood. The news had reached him by then. The house was officially listed. The mask Olivia wore had crumbled, her business exposed, her reputation unraveling. And with nowhere else to point the blame, Ethan did what he always did. He came running to me. I heard the knock before I saw him. It was a quiet afternoon. I was just finishing a cup of tea when the sound echoed through the apartment. 3 soft raps, hesitant, like the knock of someone who didn't know if he'd be welcomed or slammed. I opened the door slowly. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Unshaven, thinner than I remembered, shirt wrinkled like he pulled it off the floor. Mom, he said, voice cracked. Can I come in? I didn't answer, just stepped aside. He walked in and stood in the middle of the room like he didn't know what to do with his body. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke. Why are you doing this? He asked. To us? I almost laughed. Us, as if there had been an us in years. I sat down in the armchair across from him, calm, composed. I'm not doing anything to you, Ethan. I'm doing something for me. His jaw clenched. You're selling the house. My house. I grew up there. And you gave it away, I said, my voice low. You let your wife turn me into your maid. You watched it happen. You laughed. You never even apologized. He didn't deny it, just looked at the floor. I thought you were just being dramatic, he mumbled. I didn't know it hurt you like that. I stared at him. That's the problem. Ethan, you never bothered to know what hurt me. You just assumed I'd always be there. Cleaning up after you, paying your bills, nodding along while you let that woman chip away at who I was. He flinched. Olivia's not who I thought she was. That's not news to me. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were glassy now. I lost everything. I didn't blink. No, you gave it away. Silence stretched between us. I miss you, he whispered. I sat up straighter. I raised you, I said, fed you, clothed you, sacrificed for you, and you let me be humiliated in the house I bought. His lip trembled. I thought she was helping me. I thought we were building something. You built a lie, I said, and now it's falling apart. He stood then, pacing the room. So that's it? You just walk away? I got up, walked over to the drawer by the kitchen, and pulled out the envelope Ruth left me. I held it in my hands. I'm going to tell you something now, I said, and I need you to listen. Really listen. He nodded, confused. I handed him the envelope. These are your birth records. Read them. He sat, opened it slowly. His brow furrowed, then fell. He read the letter, the hospital files, the DNA test Ruth had quietly ordered after all those years. He looked up at me, eyes wide. This can't be real. It is. You're saying I'm not your son? I'm saying you weren't born to me, but I raised you as if you were. I gave you every piece of me, even when you didn't want it. He went pale. So who's your real son? I didn't answer. He sat there, shell-shocked, mouth open, pages trembling in his hands. I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. Now you know how I felt, I said. For years. He didn't cry. Not really. But something in him broke, and I saw it happen. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just peace. Because I finally said what needed to be said. I walked him to the door. He turned, eyes pleading. Can we fix this? I met his gaze. I don't know, I said, but it's not my job to try anymore. And I closed the door gently behind him. Not with spite, but with finality. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one holding it open. It took me 3 days to decide how I was going to do it. I practiced the conversation in front of the mirror, in my car, even in line at the grocery store with my hand clutched around a basket of oranges, whispering lines I could barely finish. I'm your mother. There was a mistake. You've lived a life that wasn't meant to be yours, and so have I. But nothing sounded right. Because how do you drop a truth like that into someone's life and expect them to survive the impact? Still, I had to try. Michael was in the bookstore, like always. The light inside fell through the windows in golden beams, softening the shelves and scattering shadows across the hardwood floor. It felt like a sacred space, a place where truth belonged. When he looked up and smiled, I almost turned around and walked away. But I didn't. Hey, he said, you came at the right time. We just got a new batch of rare poetry editions. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Actually, I said, I came to talk. He studied me for a second, sensing something in my voice. Sure, come on back. He led me through a side door to a tiny break room, a kettle on the counter, a mismatched couch, a chipped table, real life, no filters. We sat. I've been coming here for a reason, I started, twisting my hands together. I figured, he said softly. You have? You're not exactly here for the books. I gave a small, sad laugh. No, I'm not. Then I took out the envelope, Ruth's letter, the birth records, the DNA proof, and set it on the table between us. What's this? He asked, cautious. Something that's going to change everything. He looked at me, waiting. 30-some years ago, I said, my voice breaking. There was a mistake at the hospital. 2 babies, switched at birth. His eyebrows drew in, confusion blooming across his face. My son, I said, was given to another family. He went very still, and theirs was given to me. He didn't say anything for a long moment. I raised him, I continued, loved him with everything I had, but he didn't love me back. Not really. His eyes searched mine, slowly connecting pieces I wasn't saying aloud. You think I know you are. He looked down at the envelope, picked it up with trembling hands. Inside were the documents, the timeline, the explanation, Ruth's letter, with her quiet confession. He read in silence. Every second stretched into forever. When he finished, he didn't look at me right away, just set the papers down, his fingers still resting on the edges like he needed to hold on to something. This is a lot, he finally said. I know. And you're Margaret? Yes. He looked up, his eyes glassy. I don't feel anything. Not yet. You don't have to, I said. I'm not here to ask for a place in your life. I wanted you to know. I needed you to know. He nodded slowly. Why now? Because I couldn't live with the silence anymore. Because the truth deserved to breathe. He leaned back, exhaling hard. I have parents. They raised me well. I know. I love them. I would never ask you not to. We sat in that tiny room, surrounded by books and the scent of old paper and peppermint tea, and I felt something I hadn't in years. Relief. Not joy, not closure, but the freedom of no longer carrying something so heavy alone. He stood after a while, pacing slowly. I don't know what to do with this, he said honestly. I don't either, but I don't hate you. Tears filled my eyes. That's more than I expected. He turned to face me again. You didn't have to come, but you did. I didn't know how not to, I said. He nodded again, a quiet understanding settling between us. Can we take it slow? He asked. I don't want to make this something it's not. I wouldn't ask for anything else. He gave me a faint, fragile smile. You want to stay for tea? I smiled back. I'd love to. We didn't talk about the files again that afternoon. We talked about books, and weather, and how he hated the sound of wind chimes but loved the rain. And though the past still sat between us, unopened and raw, we had started something. Not a relationship, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, a beginning. By the time autumn rolled in, the leaves weren't the only things changing. The house sold faster than expected. I got the full asking price, more than I imagined. Ethan and Olivia had to vacate within 30 days. No extensions, no renegotiations. I didn't evict them out of anger. I evicted them out of necessity. Because that house had been my prison for too long, and watching them pack up their curated life, box by box, knowing every pillow, plant, and designer trinket had been bought on borrowed time, it felt like watching a theater set being dismantled. The play was over, the illusion gone. The day the moving truck came, I drove past. I didn't stop. I just watched from a distance as Olivia barked orders at the movers, her sunglasses hiding whatever remained of her pride. Ethan stood on the lawn, phone pressed to his ear, pacing in circles. I wonder if he ever thought he'd see this day. I wonder if he knew I would be the one to bring it. Their fall wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no scandals on the local news, but it was complete, Olivia's parents pulled their financial support. Her business lost every major sponsorship. Her brand, once pristine, was now whispered about in corners of town. The woman who had laughed at me in my own kitchen now couldn't afford her overpriced skincare line or daily matcha. Ethan tried to get a job, any job, but with no degree, no references, and no recent experience, doors didn't open. He moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. I heard this from the lawyer. I didn't ask. But I also didn't celebrate, because this wasn't about revenge, it was about truth, about consequences. Meanwhile, my life, quietly, steadily, was becoming something new. Michael and I continued meeting, always casually, coffee, book discussions, shared articles and little comments about life. He asked about my writing once, and I told him I'd started working on a memoir, that I had a story to tell, even if I never published it. He said, "You should. Stories like that matter." He still didn't call me Mom. And I didn't expect him to. That wasn't the point. We were building something not out of obligation, but out of choice. And that made all the difference. One afternoon, we walked through the farmer's market together. He picked up a jar of apple butter and laughed. My mom used to make this, every fall. Something about the way he said my mom. It didn't sting. It felt, okay, natural, right. Because he had a mom, and I had a son who didn't see me until it was too late. Some nights, I sat alone with my tea, wondering if Ethan was sleeping on a mattress or a floor, if Olivia still wore her silk robes, if they looked at each other now and saw all the things they'd ignored before. I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of what we were supposed to be. But grief like that, it's a shadow. It fades, little by little. And pride? That grows, especially when you learn to love yourself more than you loved their approval. I walked through my old neighborhood one last time before the sale closed, not to haunt it, just to say goodbye. I passed the school Ethan used to attend, the park where I pushed him on swings, the grocery store where I'd count coupons to afford his favorite cereal, and I let it all go, because I had given everything I had to a family that never gave back. And now, I was giving to someone who might never call me Mom, but still looked at me with kindness, with curiosity, with respect. Sometimes you don't need redemption, you just need peace, and I was finally starting to feel it. It was early November when I got the text from Ethan, just one line. Can we meet? Just once. I stared at it for a long time. It had been weeks since I'd last seen him. Weeks of silence, of distance that felt heavier than any argument we could have had. But something about the tone. It wasn't angry or desperate or accusing. It sounded like surrender. We met at a small park on the edge of town, the kind with rusted benches and a trail that looped around a dried-up pond. I picked the spot because it was neutral. No memories, no ghosts. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench with his hands clasped between his knees. He looked up, and for a moment, he reminded me of the boy he used to be. Awkward, unsure, waiting for direction. I sat down beside him, careful not to sit too close. He cleared his throat. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. I nodded, saying nothing. I wanted to understand. I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope. Again. The one with Ruth's letter, the documents, the DNA results. I handed it to him without a word. He didn't open it, just held it in his lap, like he'd already read it 1,000 times. "I did a test of my own," he said. "After you told me. Same result." I nodded again. "I spent weeks trying to figure out what to do with it," he continued. "And I kept thinking, if I wasn't your son, then what was I?" I looked at him then, really looked, and I said softly, "You were my child, but I treated you like, I know how you treated me." He winced. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quickly. "I don't deserve it." "You don't," I said plainly. "But that doesn't mean I hate you." He turned toward me, eyes wet. "Then what does it mean?" "It means I finally love myself more than I love the idea of you." The silence that followed was thick with meaning. He bowed his head. "I thought I was protecting Olivia, standing by her, but I was just hiding behind her, wasn't I? You let her rewrite the story, and you handed her the pen." He nodded slowly. "I wish I could undo it. You can't." We sat like that for a while, two people who had shared a life built on a lie, unraveling it in the cold November air. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I hope he's good to you." I looked at him, startled. "Michael," he clarified. "Your son." A breath caught in my throat. "He's kind," I said. "Gentle." He smiled faintly. "I guess some of that came from you then." We both laughed, tired, soft, not joyful, but not bitter either. "I don't want to be in your life if it hurts you," he said finally. "But if there's ever a place for me, just a corner of it." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I stood and looked out at the pond, leaves scattered like ashes across the surface. "I'll think about it," I said. He nodded. "That's more than I hoped for." As I turned to leave, I placed my hand on his shoulder for just a second. And that was it. The final moment. Not closure, but understanding. And that, I realized, was enough. Because I didn't need to fix him anymore. I didn't need to be fixed either. I just needed to be free. And I was. I really, truly was. I always thought the word freedom sounded too big, too lofty, like something reserved for speeches and parades, not something someone like me could actually live. But when I turned the key on the front door of Michael's bookstore that morning, I finally understood what it meant. He had called me the night before, said he had something to show me. His voice was casual, but there was a weight to it, something simmering beneath the surface. I walked in and saw him standing by the back wall, where a new wooden sign had been hung above an arched doorway. The sign read, "The Next Chapter." I smiled. "What's this?" He handed me a single brass key. Small, simple, polished. "It's a new section I'm opening. Cozy reading space, coffee corner, community talks. I wanted it to feel like more than just a store. I wanted it to feel like belonging." I turned the key over in my hand. "And you want me to open it?" He looked at me, serious now. "I want you to have it." I stared at him. He continued, his voice soft. "You gave someone your whole life. They treated you like furniture, like background. But I see you. I don't need you to prove anything to me. You've done enough." Tears welled in my eyes. I blinked them back. "You don't have to do this," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But I want to." I walked toward the door under the sign and slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. Inside, warm light filtered through tall windows. Shelves lined the walls, already half-stocked with classics and memoirs. A rug in the center, a worn armchair, a small table with a tea set. It felt like a room from a dream I'd forgotten I had. I turned around, completely undone. "Michael," he smiled, "consider it yours, for however long you want it." I walked into the center of the room and stood still, breathing it in, the scent of new wood, paper, and possibility. That night, I sat in the apartment one last time, the old notebook on my lap, the last page still blank. I wrote, "I was a woman who gave until I vanished. Then I became the woman who took it all back, not with rage, not with fire, but with silence, with truth, and with a kind of strength they never saw coming." The next day, I finalized the donation. A portion of the house sale went straight to a foundation that supports women over starting over, those dismissed, discarded, underestimated, just like I was. They called to thank me, but I didn't need thanks, because every time I stepped into that bookstore, into the next chapter, I remembered who I was now. Not Ethan's mother, not Olivia's maid, Margaret Walker, woman, survivor, author of her own ending. I never needed permission to start again, just a key. And now, I had it in my hand, and this time, it didn't open someone else's door. It opened mine. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.